Good evening, everyone. My name is Roxanne Adler-Hickey, and I'm the director of the W&M Washington Center. Welcome to the second event in our new event program called the W&M Writers of Washington. We are really thrilled to be able to highlight the work of alumni authors who either live in or write about the DC area through this program. And tonight's alumni authors will definitely not disappoint. I know I'm really looking forward to this rich discussion about their experience about writing about politics. I'd like to start by thanking my many colleagues at William & Mary who helped put this event together, particularly University Advancement and Tim Von Stetten, as well as my Washington Center colleague, Elizabeth Merrifield. And she'll be on later tonight to wrap up the evening. They, along with many others, made tonight possible, so thank you all. This event is also part of our center's year-long 20th anniversary celebration. And as incredible as it still sounds to me, because I've been here for most of those 20 years, we are honored to be William & Mary's campus in the city during that time and still today. Our study in DC opportunities allow William & Mary students to intern, to study with faculty, and connect with incredible alumni like all of you who are here tonight. The magic of what we do is really all of you. Our center is a place for connections and a place for belonging. You make all of that possible when you engage with us. So thank you again for being here tonight. And speaking of alumni, your moderator for tonight's discussion is Kay Floyd. Kay is the director of William & Mary's Whole of Government Center of Excellence. The WGC, which is part of the William & Mary Veteran to Executive Transition Program, serves as a university hub dedicated to all matters of national security, military and interagency training, convening academic and practitioners on research priorities, and education. Kay is the author of a forthcoming article with the Oxford University Press on whole of government crisis management. And she's also the director of the National Security and Foreign Affairs e-internship program at the Global Research Institute. Kay has taught courses with the government department at William & Mary on security and terrorism, and she has even taught with us at the Washington Center. Kay is really a wonderful William & Mary alumna and has been involved with us often during her career. Without going further on into Kay's introduction, and I certainly could, I am going to stop here, and I am very pleased to turn things over now to my colleague and my friend, Kay Floyd.
Thank you so much, Roxanne and the Washington Center. I hope everyone gets a chance to, one, participate in virtual events with the Washington Center like you're doing tonight, but also visit when we can all be safe and gather again. And please make sure that you're wishing the Washington Center a happy birthday for their 20th anniversary. So it is my absolute pleasure to have our two distinguished writers here with us tonight, coming at writing about politics from two different directions. So first of all, we have Alice McKeon. She's a writer, historian, producer, and political communication strategy professional. In her tenure in political communications, Alice has done it all. She has worked for campaign committees, think tanks, and nonprofits, including the Arizona Democratic Party, the Democratic Leadership Council, Al Gore's Alliance for Climate Protection, and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. In 2013, Alice collaborated with DLC founder and CEO Al Fromm on his memoir, The New Democrats and the Return to Power. And in 2016, she was associate producer on the documentary Crashing the Party. If that wasn't enough, she's then gone on to collaborate with former Virginia Governor and Senator Chuck Robb on his memoir, In the Arena, sorry for the blurring, which came out in the spring. Alice is a 2004 graduate of William & Mary. She lives in DC with her husband, Dave Salamini, also class of 2004, their sons, Nicholas and Peter, and their dog, I hope you love this as much as I do, Toby Ziegler. For our second author tonight, we have Will Payne. Will is a Richmond native who now lives in Bristow on the Tennessee border. He is a managing partner of Coalfield Strategies, an economic development firm that specializes in specialty agriculture, as well as renewable energy products that leverage Southwest Virginia's coal industry assets. His model is rooted in politics as far as strategy is concerned. He led a statewide bipartisan coalition for both Governor Ralph Northam, Governor Terry McAuliffe, and also Senator Mark Warner, after having worked for Republicans for many years. In 2015, he published Senator Warner's biography, detailing how the Nextel co-founder and former Virginia governor earned the Dealmaker status. Will serves as vice rector of William & Mary's Board of Visitors. He's vice chair of the executive committee and chairs both the design review board and the BOV's Committee on Administration, Buildings, and Grounds. So you can direct all of those questions to him. He is 11 months away from completing UVA's Darden Executive MBA program, and this weekend he received the C. Stewart Shepard Distinguished Service Award. So we are just a wealth of knowledge and resources tonight. Roxanne, I want to thank you and the Washington Center again for providing us with this forum. And is there anything else you want to add before we jump into it?
No, thank you, Kay, and welcome, Will and Alice.
Will and Alice, if you'll join us on video.
Hello.
All right, we're going to ease in. We're going to kind of, for the audience purposes, do a little bit of a 360 when it comes to writing about politics. So first of all, let's have Alice go first and then Will. We're friendly enough, though, that please feel free to chime in and comment on each other's. But what first drew you to writing, whether that was as an adult or earlier? Two-parter. And what drew you to writing about politics in particular? And I'll give Alice the mic first.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I feel like we could have just stopped right there, and I could have that would have been great. What drew me to writing and writing about politics? Actually, politics pulled me into writing, and William & Mary pulled me into politics. So I wasn't an English major or a government major, but after graduation, I started hanging out with the wrong crowd, those government folks. Who you know, and hanging out with them for a while, eventually fell into politics, and really loved it. And I realized that the part of it that I loved the most was the writing aspect of it, the analysis, the taking ideas and turning them into stories. And when Al asked me to write his book with him, that took it to the next level in terms of a book length piece. And that was really fun because it was all about taking the ideas and fitting them into this puzzle, the right idea at the right time, the right word at the right time, until it created this wonderful full book that all sang together. It really was, it was a great experience.
We're going to come back to your puzzle analogy. I'm going to draw on that later. But Will, what first drew you to writing and writing about politics?
Thanks, Kay, for moderating, and Alice for joining us, and also, thanks Roxanne and the Washington Center for hosting this conversation. Similar path as Alice. This effort for me kind of stemmed from a desire to prove to myself that I could do it. I mean, it was pretty much that simple. I had no knowledge of the process or of the industry. And prior to kicking off the whole effort, I'd worked like Alice in a number of roles, but over a dozen political campaigns. Senator Warner, as you mentioned, was the first Democrat I worked for a number of Republicans before that. So I had a lot of exposure to politics, a lot of on the inside and working one-on-one. And it's just fascinating the stories, the experiences that drive some of these individuals, and just had some experience in writing, political writing, fundraising, appeals, a little bit of speech writing, but nothing like this, nothing as complicated as researching, interviewing, and writing a book. And so it became a personal challenge, a labor of love and sometimes hate, but most of all, a sense of accomplishment.
It's a great segue, Will. So I'll put this to both of you, but Will first. For writing about Warner, tell us a little bit about how this book process started. Why Warner, and what were you hoping to accomplish with him in particular as the subject?
Sure. The idea came to me during the 2008 Senate campaign. He was running in the open seat after Senator John Warner announced he was retiring, and is running against former Governor Jim Gilmore. And as I said, working for all Republicans before that. But the reason goes back to when it was difficult in my book to talk about Warners when we talked about a lot of John Warner, Mark Warner, Governor Warner, Senator Warner. So I'll just say Senator Warner tonight. But the reason goes back to to his time as governor. I was working as a legislative aide for Senator Ken Stolly in Virginia Beach. There was a 2-to-1 Republican majority in Virginia and a Democratic governor. The Senate Republicans and then Governor Warner were essentially on the same page as to the dire situation that Virginia was in, a $3.8 billion budget shortfall that eventually grew to $6 billion. And so working creatively with Republicans and Democrats, it was necessary given the votes. Then Governor Warner tackled the long-term structural imbalance in Virginia's budget, making deep cuts, tough choices, and ultimately restoring faith. And so with this budget and tax reform package in 2004, I was younger, naive, but also really inspired by seeing Republicans and Democrats work together. And because my boss was in the leadership on the Republican side, he and Senator Warner now are now still great friends, and it was eye-opening for me. So when Senator John Warner announced he wasn't running for re-election, it just made me think this is a moment, opportunity for me to jump in and try something different. And so Mark Warner was famous when he ran for governor for having this Virginians for Warner coalition, Republicans, Independents, and so that was needed for this race. And so I raised my hand and competed for that and got it. And we spent a lot of time on the road together. He was more focused on that, to Democrats' dismay, maybe more focused on that than anything else, getting as many Republicans and Independents to vote for him as Democrats. And so I just admired his story, his drive. The magic that happens when he walks through a door. You have to see it, you have to feel it, for yourself. And so I texted him Thursday, or it was Thanksgiving after his election, after he won, and said that I was going to do this. Kind of stupidly did that. I don't know why, but and I know he responded, but I don't want to say what he said, but I felt compelled to tell the story, and I just wanted to kind of get it out there so I could start.
Oh, that's fantastic. Alice, for your particular subject, Senator Rob, why him? What were you hoping to accomplish with this book?
Well, like all of my projects to this point, the project came to me because I connected with the person. And Governor Rob, and forgive me, I call him Governor Rob just because he prefers governor. So in my head, I'm going to automatically do that. So Governor Rob and I met while I was interviewing him for the documentary that I had been working on, that around the DLC and that period of time in national politics. And we had a lot of time during that day to sit around while the lighting guys did their things. And we just hit it off. And his story is there are so many pieces. There are so many stages of his life that all fit together. And he had started a project before he met me, and it was just kind of in this state of disarray. He hadn't figured out how to finish it. And it was in many different pieces. And again, back to the puzzle analogy, when he told me about it, and when we first looked at the material, I could see it. I could see an end game. I could see where this was going, and that it could be really, really good if we could just get it to that spot. And so I was very, very excited about it. Honestly, and I promise I'm not going to work William and Mary into every one of my answers, but one of the reasons that we connected was because we connected in so many different points. One of them being Virginia and William and Mary. Like he understood that I knew Virginia, and it also helped that my father was a colonel in the Marine Corps, which is a big part of his story. So once we connected, we were working together, I think, within a week after we met.
I love how you're both being able to emphasize these strong personal ties and the relationships that helped you get, so much closer to the subject.
Entirely.
Let's get to the cutting room floor a little bit here and kind of how you got that subject right, because you got to know your subjects pretty well. So maybe this is a short answer, maybe it's a longer answer, but let's expand on that a little bit. What was your method for capturing the subject, for getting their voice or their tone or their views through? And Alice, will go ahead and have you start.
Okay. I was lucky in that I got to spend a lot of time with every author that I've worked with. And I really, the governor and I have spent every Wednesday together for the last 6 years. And when I mean every, I mean, I had a child in that time. I think I took 2 weeks off. I was back hanging out with him on Wednesday because it was like a touchstone for us. And we would read through portions of the text. And I think that being able to read through out loud, which is something that I recommend when I do writing seminars and stuff, I always recommend that you read what you're writing out loud. It really helps you to see how the words fit together. And I was a music minor, so I always go back to the kind of song analogy, but like you can see how the words sing if you can read them out loud. And when you're doing it with someone, you sound less crazy. So he and I would read through the text for a long period of time and also just talk. And we joke sometimes that I'm, part therapist and part writer. It helps to be able to kind of get into their head and really, I can anticipate some of his reactions and his words, and I can put those down on paper. But it becomes a very, it is all about the relationship, as you were talking about. It is all about really getting to know the subject really well.
Oh, fantastic. Will, your approach?
Sure. Slightly different in that, well, first of all, similar in that it's all about the interviews. In my case, it was really, everyone else so much more than just, Senator Warner. And that's where I think my relationships in politics, were pretty key. Had I not been in Senator Warner's orbit those few years prior, had I not worked with folks he respected, I probably wouldn't have gotten too far. Probably wouldn't have gotten those interviews because folks really opened up, and I learned then, and now it's really easy to have recordings transcribed. But it was an absolute nightmare for me to transcribe all of these interviews.
Yes.
I couldn't make it as a court reporter for sure. But let me just make it clear too. Senator Warner did not ask me to write this book. I consider it an independent biography, and so. There were ways that it could have been shut down, mostly by, interview subjects just saying no. But the years I spent in, proving that I was sincere about, my engagement in what they call Warner World, I think let me go through this whole experience. And, I only interviewed Senator Warner 5 times. It was probably 6 hours. And this was, I guess probably his first year in office. He was pretty busy then. And so it was really just to clear up questions in my mind. I wanted to tell the story through, the interviews of those around him and using primary sources. I mean, of course, well-documented, history going back years and years, but I wanted it to be as much about, stories coming from other people.
So I'm going to continue then on that story piece. What made it into the book that you would say, I could not have told the story without this. This is vital. I'm doing the book a disservice if this piece doesn't make it in. And then Alice, you can chime in when you're ready.
Oh, am I going first?
Oh, no, sorry, Will. We're all friends. Go whatever order you want. We could flip a coin.
Will, you go.
Okay, I'll take that. So former U.S. Senator John Warner, very sad about his passing this past May 26th. And someone who I think now Senator Mark Warner, models, his path in the Senate, after. And I wanted to tell the story about how the two Warners went from one-time political opponents to allies and to very close confidants. Many will recall that in 1996, their election battle, of course, Senator John Warner been in office for years, and you had this young tech entrepreneur, Mark Warner, step up and challenge John Warner. How dare he, right? And he made John Warner work very hard in that race. It ended up being a lot closer than folks anticipated. And based on the polls early on and kind of midway through the race up till election day, Mark Warner was just a few points behind. And you would expect today that one-time opponents could never be friends, and that's where their story is really unique. So they absolutely became friends, and quickly after that 1996 race, as Mark Warner was kind of readying his campaign for governor in 2001. So it was just a really neat story. I got some really, I think some of the most exciting stories I got in the interview process, certainly from Senator John Warner. He spent, 3 hours with me in his law office, and it was one of the most unique experiences in my life. He had his Senate chair, his floor chair, and then another chair, and he had them set up already in his office, kind of facing each other, and sat down and just talked and I forgot to take notes. I was recording at least, but I was just amazed by his stories in the Senate, the way things used to be. And then he talked about that 96 race. I don't think he liked to talk about politics much, but about, what it was like for him to work in the Senate with both parties. And so Mark Warner's kind of modeled that. And Kay, I can't remember what your question was. But so I think
you're good. You've answered it.
You answered it.
The story, and I'll just end this, from being a political opponents to, one of these battles in 2004, the budget battle I mentioned, for John Warner to come to Richmond, and there's this famous line where, surrounded by cameras and the press, and exclaimed, "Politics be damned. Let's consider what's best for the men and women of this great state and their families and children."
Alice, a vital piece that would have been a disservice to omit.
I think that a vital part of Chuck Robb's story is his time in Vietnam, and not just the fact that he went there, but the fact that the journey that he took to get there, because he was a highly decorated, he was the honor graduate of his class in basic school, and he got all these plum posts one after another, right up to military social aid, which is, of course, how he met Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson's daughter, who he married in the White House. And it wasn't until after that he had been requesting posts in Vietnam for many cycles, many years up till then. And he was finally going to get it right after he had his wedding in the White House, and he was the president's son-in-law, and he did not have to go. He had actually fulfilled his service to the Marine Corps. He didn't have to go into combat. He could have very respectably done a job that was behind the lines, that was not literally on a hill near the DMV, DMZ. It was, this was he led a company in combat in Vietnam, and he insisted on it. He insisted on it because the principle of earning the title of Marine was so strong for him that, and he was so stubborn that he insisted on it. And then when he was transferred, as one is, like he served the amount of time in combat that one should serve, and then he was moved to another post, as one is, he complained. I mean, he was adamant about it. And I think that that period of his life, if you don't know about it, then his time as a politician and the stubbornness, the principle that he brings to his time as a politician, where he makes decisions that other politicians don't make. It doesn't make any sense if you don't know about Vietnam and you don't know about the Marines and you don't know kind of what's at his core and what he thinks of himself as. And ultimately, he thinks of himself as a Marine. So that really was a vital part of that story.
Talking about the pieces of the book and the stories that are told, and Alice, I'll have you just go next. I'd like to invite you to each share a passage of each of your books that you find particularly interesting or that you think this audience would. Go ahead, Alice.
This was so hard to pick, and you asked me to pick something, and it's like there are so many good gems. I mean, his life, he encounters so many people, and there's all these like funny little encounters, and it was like picking your favorite cheese. It was like I don't, all of them.
I was going to ask which one's your favorite child. I'm assuming it's Toby Ziegler.
Yes,
so.
Absolutely.
Please
so
go ahead.
I ended up, he's the cutest. I ended up picking the shortest. So here we go. This is when he is governor, and it's the start of chapter 14, the aristocracy of merit. One day, a group of legislators came into my office in the Virginia state capitol. They were there to complain about my new Secretary of Commerce and Natural Resources. Their objection? Betty Diener swears. I hadn't been expecting this particular grievance, but I grasped their unstated meaning, and so I paused briefly before responding, "Don't men swear?" The legislators said it was different because Betty Diener was a lady, and this was Virginia. And it's 1981, by the way, 1982. I let their answer hang in the air for another moment. I didn't hire her to be a lady, I said. I hired her to be Secretary of Commerce. And that's it. It's just so Chuck Robb.
Well, every element that you've talked about, and everyone, you have to read the book to see even more, but how strongly his character shows through there. Mm-hmm. And leadership style, right? You don't have to yell at someone. You don't have to push them. You can just let it hang there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Will, your passage.
Sure. And I think, let me just set it up first. I think I'm sure everyone remembers vividly the DC snipers, October 2002, a very scary time for those around the Beltway in particular. And I end the book with this because it was an early test for Senator, or then Governor Warner, and set the stage for his administration. So on October 24th, I believe at 1 a.m, the shooter's vehicle was spotted and detained near Frederick, Maryland. You know, their reign of terror was over. 14 shootings that claimed 10 lives. So chapter 19, last chapter, and it's the last couple paragraphs of the book, chapter's called "The Statesman Emerges." And this is a little bit longer than Alice's, but I kind of need the 4 small paragraphs here. So when State Police Colonel Gerald Massengill called up Warner hours before the press conference, there was excitement on the line. Then there was a long pause. In a sincere tone, Warner said, quote, "If I go over there, it will become a political event. It's too important to the people of Virginia," end quote. Secretary of Public Safety John Marshall took the phone but got the same answer. Warner was clear. Quote, "He told me, with all due respect, absolutely no." And when I questioned his response, he immediately said, quote, "This is not about politics. This is the result of law enforcement working together to end a very dangerous situation. And it should be law enforcement at the press conference. I don't need to be there," end quote. Massengill had been around politics long enough to expect even Mark Warner to say otherwise. After all, every major news outlet in Virginia was going to be there. Quote, "I've always felt that it would be difficult to find a politician who would have turned down the opportunity to get that kind of exposure," Massengill said. Marshall was surprised too, given the spotlight on Virginia and the role Warner's task force played throughout the investigation. But it was Warner's sincerity that made a lasting impression on the veteran lawman. Quote, "He was more concerned that not coming would offend the chiefs and sheriffs. He said, 'Tell them I'm doing it out of respect for law enforcement and the job they do. They did all the work. They deserve all the credit,' end quote." The governor trusted his gut and didn't go to the press conference. Instead, he watched it on TV like everyone else. Warner's reaction to this tragedy early in his administration showed others that he had chosen statesmanship over ambition. To him, there was no choice to be made in the first place.
And we're back to those points on character. Now, Will, that was a fantastic passage to show through how, as you've captured, he always wanted to put Virginians first and make sure that the job was done right and it was done well and that politics didn't interfere. Thank you for that. I'm unintentionally, because I didn't know. Oh, go ahead, Alice.
I was just gonna say, if we end up with extra time, I've got some stories that are at the tip of my tongue that I'm like holding myself back from saying, because there's so many little good ones to share. But if we have extra time,
we'll just keep everyone for 9 hours. It's fine.
Exactly.
Actually, that's a wonderful thing. I should have said this at the top. If you do have a question for our authors, we're going to have time at the end. You can use the Q&A box and I'll be happy to pull from that. And then Alice, we could have time going on. I'm sure we could engage on social media as well. So I'm going to unintentionally pivot to something that may or may not be fun. I didn't know the passages our wonderful authors were selecting ahead of time. Will, thank you. Alice, thank you. But let's go ahead and, since Alice is on my screen right now, let's do some insider baseball. People are watching this call. They can read the book. What didn't make it into the book that you're allowed to share with us?
Oh
and
gosh.
Will, when she's done, over to you.
Start thinking, Will. Okay, so cutting down was a huge part of the job when I approached this project. And like I said, Governor Robb had been working on this for many years, and there was a lot more material than there was story, if that makes sense. And the big thing that we both saw at the beginning was that we needed a narrative, that what was missing was an arc. And so a lot of the process was us going through, talking through each story, and me trying to get at the heart of what did this story mean to him? What did it say about him as a person? And how did it affect his story? And there were many, many stories which he loved that were things that happened, which took us a long time to figure out, why they were there, why they were important to him. And once we could figure out why they were important to him, I could usually find a way to weave them into the story, because then they had a reason to exist. When we're talking about an emotion, you could tie it into that. For instance, I found out that he had a story about Hubert Humphrey's funeral, which was very moving, and Mondale gave a eulogy that was very moving, but it was kind of out of place when I found it. It was just kind of floating. But then I found out that it happened the day after he was first inaugurated as lieutenant governor, his first office. And so it became the end of a chapter, because it became this, I've just become a politician. It's my first day, and I am going to mourn the loss of this iconic politician with this wonderful eulogy. And it really had a lot more power then. But cut down, right? So a lot was cut down, but not very much was cut out. A lot of it was about tightening things up, finding what was important and just saying that part of it. A good example would be lieutenant governor's race, the campaign for lieutenant governors, which is 1977. There was a lot written down originally that happened. This happened, and then this happened, and the next day that happened. It's excruciatingly boring to read that about a political campaign, about what happened each day. It didn't express the importance of that race. And the importance of that race had to do with the fact that Virginia was changing, that Chuck Robb was, the first Democrat post-Byrd. He didn't have ties to the Byrd machine. He was trying to move Virginia in a different direction as a Democrat. And he broke a losing streak that the Democrats had, in the previous decade. And once we could really hone in on that aspect of the story and explaining why Virginia was what it was and where he came into it, it became a lot more interesting. So there was a lot cut off of that story from that.
Well, a story that didn't make it that you're allowed to share, or you could modify the question as Alice did. She's allowed to do that.
Sure. No, it was very difficult trying to cut down the story, but just more kind of from a bigger picture. I interviewed Senator Warner's Columbia Capital business partners. Columbia Capital, I believe, had an annualized rate of return of 194%, incredibly successful. And I got to interview his business partners, Jim Murray, former rector William Mary, and now UVA, Mark Kington and Dave Mixer, among many others who were involved in those years when Warner was the world's first cellular broker. One of these interviews was over drinks in downtown in DC somewhere, and trying to transcribe that interview was a lot of fun too. When everyone sounds the same, and we're all having wine and whatever else. The stories are incredible, and I always remind Senator Warner that we published the PG version. That there's another version out there. But talking to those gentlemen, talking to Morgan O'Brien, who led Nextel Communications, and members of the General Assembly with whom Senator Warner was very close, still is very close. And one of those on watching today, former Delegate Jim Dillard, William Mary grad, left incredible legacy in higher education and K-12 education. But Delegate Dillard and all these other the so-called Gang of Five, leaders of the Republican leaders of the General Assembly and the Senate, Ken Stolley, John Chichester, Tommy Norman, Walter Stosh, and William Walkler. I mean, the stories that they had were incredible. They're obviously very close friends, but there are enough stories there, worthy of their own books. So I can't share any of those. But I wish I could have put a lot more color, I guess, in this book. I mean, there's a lot in there, but not the real fun stuff.
All right. So you both politely demurred. You are good at politics to directly answer my question and give us some juice. We'll have to come back to that another time. So we've talked about this 360 process, and now we're getting to some questions I'd like to ask you about the completion of the book. Can you share with us what it was like, the experience of completing this book? Was it joy, relief, some sadness? And now that you both have a little bit of distance, Will has more distance than Alice, but how are you feeling about your book child? And Will, why don't you go ahead, and then Alice?
Yeah, it felt like it was a never-ending story. I made an outline early on after that Thanksgiving text. I made an outline before the weekend was over, and I thought I could get away with a few dozen interviews. I ended up having at least 18 different outlines. I know I conducted at least 206 interviews, researched just under 5,500 different documents, including mostly news articles and also government reports. I spent 9 months almost exclusively traveling, doing these interviews. I felt like I had to do them all once, because you meet with somebody, then that turns into you have to meet with 2 other people just to complete that story. And that was the best part of this whole process, the interviews and hearing these stories. The worst part, of course, that I've said a couple times tonight, transcribing those interviews and trying to make sense of my chicken scratch handwriting. It didn't matter what I don't know why I even took notes. It was just an incredible experience listening to people. Their memories are incredible. I don't have that ability to remember, and many go back decades. So, but my best feeling was, I even got my publisher to delay my submission deadline of that first draft, just so I could go to Vegas for this long-awaited Twisted Sister and this 80 Power Ballads show. And I finished the last 3 chapters on the plane ride back, stayed up all night, submitted at exactly, 8:59 a.m. Just so that I could get that in on time because it already pushed it back a couple times. So I crashed after that. It was the greatest feeling. The rest of it, the editing part, not exciting at all, but getting to the point where submitting that first manuscript, massive accomplishment, and everything, and the 48 hours leading up to that.
I would say I did not have as much of a crash, I guess. No, that's actually not true. The seconded to all of the things that Will said. And then I would just add that, having the actual book, like feeling the book in your hand, that there was definitely a sense of relief. As anybody who has worked with, especially written with Governor Robb before, it is, and there's actually a story in the book about it. It is an up until the teleprompter is on type of thing. And so the fact that it was actually in my hands, I did not believe it was going to happen until it was actually there. But it was tampered a little bit. The elation of it was hampered slightly by the fact that we were in the middle of COVID still. We were doing events like this, and we couldn't have a party. And Will's done a great job of mentioning all the people that helped him, and I have not done as great of a job of that. But this was definitely the people that have worked for Chuck Robb, who call themselves the Robb Mob, and I now am a part of this. They are just the most wonderful people, and they're so helpful and have been so supportive, which I have definitely needed throughout this process. The very first call I made was to Stuart Gamage, who it's a recognition from all of William and Mary. And she has been like the most, the dose of reality and the good advice and the support all wrapped into one, which has been essential. And I was able to interview people from all walks of his life: Ben Dendy, Tom Lehner, Steve Ricchetti, all of these folks, Terry Paul, Peter Cleveland. These were all just like so helpful. And the fact that we couldn't at the end of this have a party where all of those people came together and said, yay, it's done, let's all sign the book, was really, really hard.
Kay, if I could step into, I wanted to ask Alice, I found that I was incredibly undisciplined and probably still am in writing, and always seem to do things still last minute. But I imagine you have a lot more discipline given the projects you've worked on. But I got to the point where I couldn't work at a desk anymore, and in fact, I wrote at least 2.5 chapters in my truck. I had a F-150 at the time, and I would go get an iced tea and drive to different places. I would drive to Virginia Beach and write in a parking lot somewhere with all my notes in the passenger side, and somehow I was able to finish the book, finish chapters that way. But I've never been able to figure out how to really be disciplined about it. But I want to hear kind of the opposite story. I'm sure that you have.
I wouldn't. I don't know if I would describe myself as disciplined or not. I feel like I'd have to ask somebody else, ask Dave about that. But I am exceptionally organized, and that has been like absolutely essential to this, especially with a project this long. He actually asked me a couple of weeks ago where a certain story went, and I had documents going back to what we call the alpha draft. Each draft has its own name so that we could distinguish them. And my notes from the alpha draft had cut stories from the alpha draft. And then I had my notes during our conversation, because I don't take handwritten notes, because you're right, I can't tell what they say. I take a typewritten notes and I just transcribe it like while I'm doing it. And it's the only way I can, I don't know, I hardly ever use them except for when this happens, and I could go back and say, oh no, you said that this story was blah, blah, blah. And so that's why it's not there anymore, or whatever it was. So I would say it's not necessarily that I'm more disciplined. It's that the level of organization calls for specific short deadlines. So like, we're working on chapter 3 this week. So that's my deadline for this week. And so because it's broken up like that, I can meet little deadlines. And then I, every Friday, do basically a progress report, like an update. And I've had to institute these little things because I work by myself in this room with the dog. And that's really hard.
Well, thank you for chiming in with that. I'm really glad that you both shared that. I've got one final question, and then we're going to turn to the chat box. Although I have many questions if there aren't a lot of people in the chat box. So let's bring this back to William and Mary. That's kind of how we began, Alice, when you talked about drawing, what drew you to writing. So as phenomenal William and Mary grads, how do you think that your university experience or particular class or professor prepared you for writing about politics? And whoever wants to chime in first may.
I'll go. So this is an interesting question for me because I was an art history major, and at first blush, it's not government. But as I thought about it a little bit more, I think that the thought process crosses over a lot there, especially the thing that I really took from especially that aspect of William and Mary was the small group discussions. And it was when we were able to sit around a table, and the thing that I learned from that was that nobody had a right answer. The professor didn't have a right answer. We were all analyzing the same work. We were analyzing it in the context of history, in the context of the politics at the time. I specialized initially in early Christian and Byzantine art. And so it's all about politics, and it's all about religion, and it's all about the culture at the time. And those influences on the visual medium that, because there was low literacy, that's how you got things across to people. And that was your, mailers of the day. That was your television ads of the day. And being able to sit around a table and converse with somebody who has a PhD in this and have them, shout out to Professor Wallach and Professor Cohen, look at you and validate the idea that you had about this topic, planted the seed for me that stood me very well in politics, which was nobody else has a right answer. Your answer is as good as anyone else's answer, and anyone else's answer may be as good as yours, but it's your job to sit at the table and give your opinion on it. And if you don't, you can't look to everyone else at the table and expect there to be the right way to do it. You have to make up the right way to do it. And that's, I think, what enabled me to do projects like this. Many people can tell you how to write, but they can't tell you how you should write. And approaching a project this large, you just have to figure out how you can do it. And I think that's really what William and Mary kind of prepared me for.
Well, other than writing in your truck, particular elements that especially prepared you or a professor for writing about politics?
Sure. I mean, as we all know, William and Mary alums are involved at every level of politics and government. So maybe it's fate for both of us. I remember a freshman seminar, it was about Virginia politics, Virginia government. I took several other government courses and polling, and even did exit polling, probably the 2000 election.
I didn't get to do any of this. My freshman seminar was on Bach.
Well, it got me hooked. It got me hooked. The point where I spent my spring break of senior year and spring semester, my last year, jumped on the Hager campaign. John Hager was lieutenant governor at the time, running for the nomination for governor, a Republican. Didn't know what I was doing. I mean, at all, probably wasn't good at it. And, but I got hooked, and a William & Mary alum kind of got me involved in that and helped me get a job, managing a legislative race after that. But and have tried to get other William & Mary alums involved in politics on both sides of the aisle. And so I think that early exposure really mattered. If it wasn't for that, I mean, I credit William & Mary for everything. I wouldn't have gotten involved in politics without politics. I wouldn't be doing anything I'm doing today. I wouldn't be on the board of visitors without politics. As much as I, despise politics, you got to love it too.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add on to what you just said that like this isn't a class, but the thing that the reason I keep coming back to William & Mary as an adult is the people. I mean, obviously I married a William & Mary alum, so it's like hard to get away from it. But he and our friends are what got me into politics. And at every single step of the way, there's been some alum who has helped me in some way, some connection to William & Mary that has gotten me an interview, as gotten me the phone call. It's kind of unreal around here how many people have so many connections to William & Mary and how many times I come back to it.
I think we can all blame Jesse Ferguson for getting us into certain aspects of politics.
Seriously, Jesse.
Well, if Jesse's watching this later, I'm sure he feels the love. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn to the chat box. Mary Trigiani would like to know, what did you two discover or learn from these two leaders that led you to make a decision about your work life, like your style, your goals, your execution? So Alice, what have you discovered or learned, and how has that made a decision about your work life?
I discovered that I curse a lot more than I thought I did. Chuck Robb does not, and he's fine with it. I try and rein it in when I'm around him, and it was hard for a while. That was tough. Other things about say the question one more time.
What did you discover or learn from these two leaders that led you to make a decision about your work life? Maybe your work style, your work goals, how you execute your work.
One thing I would say is just that I stayed with him for a lot longer than I thought I would. And that seems to be a trend among the Robb mob, is that the turnover rate in his office was unbelievably low. People worked for him for 25 years. And I'm not sure, I couldn't put my finger on one thing that could explain that, but I realized that Chuck Robb inspires a certain kind of loyalty that even people that have not worked for him for 20 years are absolutely devoted and have been unbelievably helpful.
I'll add, I think with Mark Warner, it was kind of giving a good wake up call, basically saying, what are you doing still working in politics? I'm paraphrasing here, what are you doing with your life doing that? And so if you want to, really try to advance and grow, you've got to specialize in something, pick something, go after it hard, become an expert in it. And absolutely took that advice and working in energy now and thank him for that. And we'll be thanking him for that forever, I'm sure. But that's exactly what he did. And it's a great career. His career path is very unique, and was able to kind of look around the corner before anyone else. So when he gives you advice, you better listen.
Well, that's great, both of you. So I'm going to draw on Amy Hare's question next, but I'm going to take chair's prerogative and amend it slightly because, Will, the question is, what is Chuck Robb, or in your instance, Senator Warner's next chapter? Now the memoir is complete. You're a little bit different. So I think that Senator Warner's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. He's doing great work for Virginia there. But if you have something to conjure, is there a next step or something on the horizon for him? But also, what's your next subject? Well, what if you could write about something else, what's next for you? And then Alice, you could more literally answer the question, what's Chuck Robb's next chapter now that the memoir is complete? But then I want to know what's next on your docket.
Yeah, real quickly, this book came out in 2015, and I focused exclusively on his time, personal, his professional career, and then running for governor and serving as governor, not his time in the Senate, which began in 2009. I admire him for many reasons, but he doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have to take the arrows in the back that he does in politics, and to stand up against members of his own party even. And so I respect him greatly for that, and I think that's led to this position he's in the Senate today, chair of intelligence, and a major player, mover and shaker in politics, someone who's respected on both sides. So you're right, Kay. I think I hope he stays exactly where he is, because I trust that he's doing the right job, the right thing for Virginians. And for me, I now live in Southwest Virginia and have for the last 2 years. I'm fascinated by the rise and somewhat demise of the coal industry, what it did to create wealth and opportunity, and how that has almost come to a grinding halt, except for met coal for steel production, and deal with that fallout every day with my work. And it just, it's an interesting story about how the past can kind of give us a sense of what we need to do differently in the future, especially in a rural area that was dependent on one economy for so long.
We're going to be tracking your progress there. Alice, Chuck Robb's next chapter, and also your next chapter.
Well, he turns 81 on Saturday, so let's give him a breather after the book. We still have some events to do, and then we can move on to next ideas then, I think. For me, I would, like I said earlier, the subjects have come to me, like I have met people that I have connected with, and that's how these projects have gotten started up to this point. And so I can't predict what my next move will be. If anyone out there has a story they'd like to tell, contact me. I'm interested in new projects. I would love it if my next subject could be a female leader. I would love to tell a woman's story. I would love to tell a story of overcoming that those series of obstacles, especially in politics in the last 50 years, basically. I would love to tell the story of somebody like Barbara Jordan or Patricia Schroeder, some of these women who have broken down barriers that we don't even remember were there necessarily, and really highlight their stories in a way that contextualizes our current political situation a bit. I think there's a lot to be learned from the last 30, 40, 50 years of little d democratic politics, also big D democratic politics. And I know it is kind of my sweet spot. It's the area that I know the most about, so I'm partial, but that so much has happened in the last 50 years to get us to where we are today. I would love to tell more stories about how we got there.
Well, we are here to read your fantastic works and follow your fantastic work. And two, if you need William & Mary interns, go see Roxanne in our Washington Center.
Right.
So let me go ahead and thank you both for being with us today, and also for our tremendous audience. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to discuss, this Writers in Washington series, and to be part of the 20th anniversary birthday celebration of the Washington Center. So with that, let me hand it over.
All right, thank you, Kay. Thank you to everyone for joining us for the second William & Mary Writers of Washington. To Kay, thank you for volunteering to do the moderating. You are amazing. To Alice and Will, thank you so much for volunteering your time and your evening to talk about your books and your experiences. And thank you for being great alumni to William & Mary and to the Washington Center. So thank you so much. To the audience, I hope you guys enjoyed this talk as much as I did. And thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And to people watching the recording in the future, thank you too. As mentioned, yeah, this is the Washington Center's 20th anniversary. In the chat, I put all the links for books and to our website and to the William & Mary Writers of Washington website. So keep an eye on those websites for anything. And if you want their books, check the links out. With that, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.